cute.
His is the real thing, like the show Yorkie.
Flame says hi.
Oh, oh my God. Oh, look at that. So sweet. Okay, I have to show. Okay, if he's sleeping, so he's not so great.
It's time for the dog show.
Oh, the dog show? Good.
It's time for the dog show. We got all the dogs coming.
Oh,
Claire's got his dog out. Here we go.
Beautiful.
Okay.
It's the Tuesday dog parade.
Funny. All right.
Sometimes we have a lot of babies and stuff, and today it's dogs.
Well, you know, my biggest fear in this demo was going to be that he was going to start to, you know, get rambunctious. So I can't believe I just did that, because hopefully
I can be like, wait, I can be on TV? What's going on here?
Yeah. I'm going to go wash my hands.
Okay. Okay, once Chef comes back from washing her hands, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our Taste Talk today. We are very excited. This is actually our first baking and pastry Taste Talk, Chef Heidi. So we are very honored to have you here as the first one to share some great baking techniques with us. And I'm super excited because one, she's going to show us what to do with the extra sourdough starter, because I did have someone ask about that, but also bagels. Who doesn't love bagels? It's like one of those great breakfast treats and everything. So again, please keep your microphones on mute during the Taste Talk. If you have any questions, put them down in the chat. I'm going to share some of the PowerPoints that Chef Heidi has sent to me and everything, so you can see some things. But don't worry, don't have to jot down everything that you see. I'm more than happy to send that information to you as well. Just email taste@nl.edu. Again, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Christine Duke. I am the Continuing Education Program Manager for Kendall College at National Louis University. And I'd like to start this Taste Talk off and just push it right over to Chef Heidi Hedeker, who's going to be teaching us all about bagels. So,
good. Thank you so much. And Christine, this is just, I think, such a wonderful way for everybody to feel connected to each other. This is Christine's brainchild. I mean, she's really, I don't know, I hope that all of you have had the chance to go to some of these, because they're so personal, you know? So that's what I'm excited about. Well, some of us have been making starters, right? Because there's a couple of different reasons why you might make a starter. You know, it sounds intriguing. Also, now actually there's a very real reason, which is that there's not a lot of yeast out there, right? So you can actually make your own yeast, is something that is good to know. And so the recipe is on the PowerPoint for starting your starter. But once you get going with it, you have to keep feeding it, and then you're going to have a discard all the time. And that's where people usually wind up losing their starters, because there's a couple reasons. First of all, it's normal. Who wants to throw away good food? So you're always discarding, and that feels horrible. Another thing is that just to keep on schedule and keep doing it regularly. So this is a recipe that is really easy to use, and what I found is that if I start the week with only about a tablespoon of starter, and I keep feeding it every day, by the end of the week, by Friday, I'll have a lot of starter. So like I might have this much starter by Friday, okay? That means I'm not throwing anything out. I just keep adding to it. And then what do I do with this pot of bubbling stuff, right? So that's what this recipe, that's where this comes from, okay? So I'm gonna show you two ways. You can make these bagels with starter, or you can just make them as what's called a straight dough. Straight dough is that you have, you know, regular yeast, regular flour, and water. But I'm gonna show you the mise en place right now for both ways, okay? Let me get these out of the way. Okay, actually before I do that, I want to show you the process of feeding the starter. These are 3 different examples. So this, you can see, this is a rye sourdough starter. And you see how different this is, like in terms of the consistency of it. Rye is always made with a stiff starter. Rye is the easiest fermenting flour that there is. Okay, so when you look at how to start a starter, usually it has some kind of rye flour to get it started. Okay. This is a starter. Now, some people, a lot of us, myself included, have been, we've had all kinds of starter mishaps and catastrophes over the years. What does it mean? It means that my starter died. Oh my God, what do I do? So the other day I was like, you know, what do you do? How do you know the starter is dead? Well, it just turns into pancake batter and it doesn't bubble anymore. But what's missing in the starter is food for the yeast, and it's also missing yeast, live yeast. So you can take your starter that is died, and if you put into it 1 to 2% of its total weight in instant yeast, okay, so you're kind of like treating it like a bread dough at that point. And then you add in equal parts of water and flour to it, your starter is going to actually come back to life and you can use it again. Okay, so that's what you can do. You can see that's what I did with this one. It was, you know, I had discard and I let it sit and I didn't feed it. And then I was like, oh my God, it's dead. And I thought, I'm going to just try reviving it by putting like 1% of yeast powder in it, you know, and a little bit of fresh flour for that to feed on, and I got it going again. Okay, so don't despair. You can get it going again. Okay, this is a healthy starter. You can see how, you know, you can just see how it's bubbling, kind of like a freshly poured beer, actually. So what we're going to do right now is we're just going to feed it. I just want to go through that with you. When you have a starter, basically you take equal parts of the starter. Can you see okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And to that, you're going to add equal parts of flour. Okay? And you're going to add the same amount of water as you did of flour. Okay? So you basically wind up with something that's like a batter. Okay, this is a liquid starter. It's different than a firm starter. So you can see, like, people who are really into baking, they've got multiple starters going. But the most important one to really have is the liquid starter, because you can always build rye breads off of a liquid starter, okay? You can build all kinds of things off of a liquid starter. Okay, so this is what it's gonna look like. The reason I wanted to show you this right at the beginning of our session today is because this starter is really healthy, and we're going to look at it again after 30 minutes, and we're going to see how it's actually starting to consume the flour that we just put in it, okay? But I'm going to set it aside right now, and then we'll come back to it. Get these out of the way. Okay, so basically, again, this recipe came about because it was a way to use up old starter. So this is where I'm at with this recipe, and if you read the recipe, you'll see and you'll understand it. You're basically taking your leftover starter from the week, or when however much you have, anywhere between 2 ounces to 5 ounces, okay? And then to that, you're gonna mix in 1 pound of flour and 1 pound of water. Okay, so I did that last night, and I marked it with a rubber band. This is kind of like a baker's trick for measuring like the leavening power of a starter. So this is where we were at last night, and then basically we're almost double it now.
Wow.
Okay, so you
That's
can
a great trick.
yeah, as you can see, like how lively this is. Like, so this is what we're going to be using to make our dough with, okay? Now, if you don't have the starter, no worries. Like a classic bagel dough is a straight dough. Okay, so what does that mean? It means I've got flour. It means I've got water. Okay, I got yeast. Okay, and if you actually have, if you're really into bagels, you might get what's called vital wheat gluten to boost the protein of the flour. That's going to make it a really chewy bagel. Okay, you got a little tiny bit of sweetness, some kind of honey or malt. Okay, and then you got salt. Okay, so if I'm making a bagel without the starter, I can just take this and put it all in the mixing bowl. So since most of us don't have starters, I'm just going to go ahead with the straight dough bagel dough. Does that make sense, or should I do the other one? Doesn't matter to me.
This is fabulous, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So when I was a kid, this was my prop, okay? My mother used to say to us as a joke that she was, I hope it's not, that she would go after us with what's called the Kochlöffel. Okay, so in German that means the cooking spoon. So I was like, this is a really nice big wooden spoon, so pay attention, right?
Chef, we
Yeah.
did have a question. For that flour, should it be a bread flour or an all-purpose flour?
Yeah, unfortunately for these, it's really kind of important to try to get bread flour.
Okay.
The alternative you have is if you don't, like I know that flour is kind of iffy right now. If you use all-purpose flour, then make sure to get vital wheat gluten. Okay, like that's 100% protein. It's like 18% or maybe 30% protein content. So you can add that into all-purpose flour at a rate of about 2%, and you're going to be able to boost it to the point where it would be a bread flour.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you can get that from King Arthur flour.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to check that this is all working. Okay, so like we said, this is a straight dough. Straight dough method means everything just goes in here. So usually I start with my dry ingredients. Now, one thing to remember is that you don't want the salt and the yeast to touch ever, okay? Because what happens is the salt it likes to draw water to itself, and yeast needs water to interact with the sugars in the dough. So you'll kill the yeast if those two things come in contact. Okay, I do have some vital wheat gluten that I'm going to add to this. Okay, and basically what you want to do is when you're baking, you know, the one thing I've worked with a lot of old time bakers, okay, and they've got all kinds of tricks. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. And they're very efficient workers. Like, so I got these two containers of things, right? You know, I've got honey and I've got water. Like same thing, if I have my starter and I pour it in here, I would take some water and use it to rinse out the other bowl, okay? So that my cleanup becomes, you know, like non-existent. So those guys, they never like to clean. It's not like in a restaurant where you have a bunch of pot washers. In a bakery, usually, it's very few people working, so they get really efficient. Okay, so I've got everything in here. I'm gonna add my water. Okay, and again, this is the straight dough method.
So, Chef, do you prefer the straight dough method, or do you prefer doing ones with starter yourself?
Yeah, so the straight dough is probably lower stress. It really is. Like you see why commercial bakeries have gone these routes that they've gone. Like adding vital wheat gluten would definitely be something a commercial bakery would do.
Okay.
My mixing is going to be so simple because of that. So if we did it with the starter, you know, there's a little bit more expertise connected with that, okay? So some of you are probably thinking, well, what temperature should that water be? Or maybe you're not thinking that, but you might think it. So if you get to be a really, really good bread baker, you're always going to have an exact desired dough temperature, okay? And it's usually between 72 degrees and 78 degrees. And that dictates what temperature the water is. Okay, so I think that for all of us, just keep in mind that you want to have that dough come off the mixer no hotter than 80 degrees, okay? A bagel dough is a very developed dough, so you're going to be mixing it pretty vigorously. It is going to get a little bit, you know, it's going to warm up the dough. And so this water that we put in here should feel slightly cool to the touch, okay? Just kind of use common sense.
Chef, I have a little bit of a personal question being asked, which I actually know the answer to. Did your family own the Gladstone Bakery in Chicago?
Yeah, we actually lived above the bakery. Yeah, no, totally. My first job was I had my first pretend job and I had my first real job. My pretend job was to put cookies on trays and dip them into chocolate when I was 5. And of course, that kind of suckered me in. But then when I was 13, then my real job was to pick strawberries. We did about 200 decorated cakes a week, and we would go through probably 12 to 20 cases of strawberries, and somebody had to pick that green stuff off of the berry. So that was my job for a while. But then I learned how to decorate cakes because I didn't like the job of picking strawberries. So, but yeah, we owned it, and yeah, I grew up above the bakery. I mean, like, our family lived above it. Okay, so here we go. Christine, you live right there now, right?
Yeah, I'm in the area, so.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Nice area. Okay, so can you guys hear okay? Can you hear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so whenever you're mixing any bread dough, what you're gonna do is you're gonna start off on first speed or low speed. Okay, if you're doing it, you could do this by hand, actually. Nothing to stop you. And you're gonna mix it together until you get to what's called the shaggy mass, okay? And I'll show you it. Oops, I think I misscaled. Can you believe this? After all of that, I missed it.
Oh no.
I have to add a little bit of flour to it. Sorry, I was a little bit excited there.
That's okay.
Actually, okay, well, this is illustrates.
It's a learning experience, yeah.
Actually, you're right, because I mean, these things happen to all of us, right? And it's like, how do we recover from it? Okay, so you notice what I did. I mixed it on low speed, and I had it going for about 2 to 3 minutes. Basically, in any bread dough, you are supposed to check it after 4 to 5 minutes, okay? And what you're checking for, if you want to be a fancy pants baker, you will say that's the time you check for the hydration. What does hydration mean? It means the water content in the dough. So if I mix this for 4 minutes and the dough is like, you see how loose this is? I don't know if you can see it, but this is more like the texture of what a Danish dough would be, okay? So somehow the students who are scaling this recipe screwed up. I'm just kidding. It was me. I screwed up, okay? Like, I didn't put in enough flour. So now, here's the thing. If I need to adjust this, I need to get it spot on right away. I can't be adding, a little bit of flour for the next 5 minutes. I have to really look at this and make a calculation. So I know that I scaled out 1 pound of bread flour for this. And if I'm thinking about it, I would say I'm about 20% short in this dough, So that's how much I'm gonna add. So 20% of 16 ounces is 3.2 ounces, right? Okay, so I'm gonna scale that right now. And I'm gonna add it to the dough, okay? And I'm gonna, I need to, like I say, this is kind of important because it really is gonna affect the quality of your dough. And you may be a little nervous, but if you just take a breath and think about it, your common sense is actually gonna prevail, okay? That's the thing about baking. What happens a lot of times, people get very nervous and they start treating it like cooking, which is fine, but baking is more of a structural thing, what I mean? It's not like you can adjust it in minuscule amounts. You kind of have to structurally adjust it. Okay, so I've got 3 ounces of flour here. That's what I calculated, was that this needed about 20% of the total flour weight added. So we're gonna do it again. Again, this is all within the window of 3 to 4 minutes into the mixing time. Okay, and I think you're gonna see, like a very, our day will go on smoothly. It won't be a stressful moment. Okay, this really illustrates now where we're at. Okay, now do you see this? It's starting to pick up off the sides of the bowl. This is what we're talking about with that shaggy mass stage. You can see how the gluten is starting to develop. It's actually pulling off the sides, okay? That's where I want to be with a bagel dough. Same thing with a challah dough.
Okay, some people are very curious about your scale. They want to know what kind of scale you have.
No, exactly. I can't recommend, I mean, I'm not a spokesperson for this scale, but this is the scale, and it's not that expensive. It was like 30 bucks. It's called Joseph and Joseph. I got it at the MCA, at the Museum of Contemporary Art. It's not, you know, it's like a modern art kind of thing, but you can see it folds up. It's unbelievable.
Super cool, yeah.
It's really accurate, and like, you can put it into your knife kit. I've had it for about 3 years now, and it's not even, they have it at Kohl's, I think. I mean, I've seen it on the internet. Okay, so you can see this is starting to pick up. Okay, so again, this is where we would want to be after 4 minutes of mixing on first speed, because now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn it up. We're going to develop the dough. Okay, so this is a KitchenAid 10-speed mixer, so I'm on 4. I want to be medium, okay? But you can hear it. Everybody can see okay? Okay. Okay, we want to mix this anywhere between another, let's see, 4. So between another 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, 5 to 8 minutes. The total mixing time should be about 12 minutes.
Okay, so Chef, would now if you were doing this with the starter, would the mixing process be exactly the same, or would there be difference?
No, it's the same. Okay, and so basically what this is called, it's called the improved mixing method, okay? What does that mean? It means that in a commercial bakery, a lot of times they'll do what's called intensive mix, and it's like they'll just mix the dough for like 20 minutes at like a high speed, okay? Why do they do that? Well, the dough really toughens up, it develops. You know, a lot of those practices are what people believe has led to gluten intolerance. Because if you mix the dough for 20 minutes on high speed, it's going to be a really glutinous dough. Okay, but to answer your question again, like with the pre-ferment in it, it's the same thing. You're going to mix it low speed until the dough comes together, make your judgment about the dough, and then you're going to finish it on medium speed.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, where we're at right now is what's called the cleanup stage. Okay, so you can see how that dough is actually cleaning up the bowl. Okay, so that's it's like, that's why straight dough is such a great method, because it's so easy. It's like if you get the water content right, you're not going to have to really mess around with it. So now it's basically cleaning up the bowl. I'm going to mix it another minute or so, just so that it's really, really like, stiff. Then we're going to coat the dough with oil, and we're going to put it to ferment. Okay, so. Okay, if you're somebody who likes to bake, some things that you should try to invest in that will make your life a lot easier are like a few of these different kinds of bins to put your doughs into, okay? Try to get, this is like a 2-gallon container, Like I know that it's big enough so that I can put a lot of different sizes of doughs into it. Okay. So our dough is like really developed. It's coming off the sides. And basically to make your life easier when you handle any dough, what I was taught, and there's some arguments among bakers about some of these things, okay? So, but I would say 50% of the bread bakers you work with will do the same thing I did, which is I oil down the dough, okay? So that means that the dough is gonna come right out of the bowl. Okay. You see, any place I touch this dough, if it's got oil on it, it's not sticking to everything. Okay, so you can kind of see how we can lift it right up. We can drop it into our proofing bin like this. Okay, and with the oil on it, now the next part of the dough developing is that the fermentation in the dough is going to start to give off gas, okay? And it's going to start to expand the dough. And the fact that we've oiled this dough down means that it's not going to stick to anything. So my job is going to be a lot easier even after the dough ferments. Okay, so we'll set this aside. Okay. So here we are, our dough is fermented. And you can kind of see how this is expanded. And so with this straight dough method, I need to allow it to ferment for about an hour.
Okay. Do you need to put a lid on the dough to ferment, or can you cover it with like a tea towel or something?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because that was the other part of the investment question. Not investment so much as setting yourself up so that when you're baking, everything goes smoothly, right? So, you know, if you get these containers, well, one of them you can use to store cloths that are, like you said, tea towels for covering up doughs, because you're going to have to do that. Another one is used for covering up, for holding plastic bags, because that's another thing you might use to cover up a dough, you know, once it's shaped. So anyway, this is kind of not answering your question. Yes, you should have it covered up. But I'm just saying, because I've baked at home now for a while, and I'm realizing the stress of it. Like, baking can be very stressful because you use so many containers, but once you start to think through it, you can really get more economical in how you work, and that's when it's fun, you know? Okay, so here's our dough, and we're gonna, let's see. Oh, okay. We're gonna go ahead and divide it. We're gonna shape it, okay? So, you know, this is, again, try to just think ahead and make your life easier. So this is just some flour, dusting flour. So I keep it separate so that I don't have to keep wiping down my table and then putting flour on and wiping down, etc. Okay. Can you see okay? Is everything?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and a standard sandwich roll is scaled at 3 ounces. Okay. So I'm going to scale this into 3-ounce pieces. And does anybody know what day is National Bagel Day?
Oh my goodness, that's a serious question. There's so many national days. I usually know some of them. That one I don't know. Does that anyone quickly Googling that?
Okay, so one thing we're going to have to do with these is
someone said every day.
It's every day. Oh my God, I love that. That's the right answer.
Yeah.
That's the word bagel, and well, the first known mention of the word bagel by food historian, well, let's say, food historians who have studied this topic found that the first mention of the word bagel was in Krakow, Poland in 1608. It is supposed to be related to the Yiddish term for Beugel, like that's like bugle with a U in it as well, which in Yiddish or German means ring or bracelet. There's also a connection to the Austrian German, which is the word stirrup. The word.
Oh, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I can see that.
So, so the word is related to a ring-shaped thing or a round-shaped thing. I learned this just before class, that if you're a tennis player and you win that doesn't make sense, right? Because, okay, well, it's called a bagel if you have a 3-set match and you win 3-0 with the opponent getting 0. But as I'm thinking about it, I know enough about tennis to know that you don't go 3 sets unless you actually, the other person wins 1. So
yeah.
Okay, so can you see this okay? So basically what we're doing here is we made our lives easier by proofing that in a rectangle. You saw how that was a rectangle. We cut it off into strips. That made my life easier, right? I'm not having to deal with all kinds of noodles of dough. Now our job is to make a cylinder. Okay, this shaping is exactly the same as you would do for a loaf or for a baguette. So basically you see you have this, you can flatten it a little bit to degas it. And now this is the thing that people struggle with a little bit is you're basically wrapping the dough around your thumb and it creates a cylinder of dough. Okay, and you should be able to see the seam. Now, why is this so important? Because you've bitten into a bagel, right? It's like the texture of that bagel, the grain of the bagel is really important to the tightness and the chewiness of it. Okay, so this has to be shaped in a way that causes all the grain to go in one direction. Okay, so I'm gonna start off by shaping these into, like I said, into cylinders. Okay. Okay, you basically want about an 8 or a 9-inch cylinder. Okay, pinch it together. Again, look at the seam. Okay, now, sometimes people struggle because they have a sticky dough, right? And then they're like, oh my God, I have to put more flour down. You have to be careful. You don't want to use too much flour, okay? So if your dough is really sticky, you can always chill it, because that's going to help firm it up a little bit and you'll have an easier time shaping it. If you don't let the dough ferment long enough, that's another reason why it would be sticky. Okay, like if I mix it and then I try to shape it 20 minutes later, there's a good chance that it might be sticky because the fermentation is part of what develops the dough. Oops. Okay, so this is what we got, all right? Then you're gonna go back to the first one. Okay, now if I was making challah out of this, I could braid this into a challah. It's a different dough, but I would just go back and I would make these all a little longer and then I would braid it. But we're making bagels, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna overlap it like so and then roll it a little bit. Okay, and your biggest challenge with this is trying to be sure that the volume of the dough is even around the whole ring, okay? Because inevitably you have kind of a fat side to it. So that's why when you go back, okay, so again, we're gonna take it, the seam goes down, you're gonna overlap it like that, and now you're gonna roll it. And try really hard to get that place where it joined even. Okay. How big should the hole be at this point? Well, it should be about the size of a golf ball, maybe a little bigger. Okay, this one has a pretty big hole on it because they're going to proof, but at the same time, you don't want there to be such a small hole now that the whole thing proofs together.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're in Montreal, they do a different shape sometimes, which is like a fish shape, which I always think is so pretty, but I'm not, like it's more like this, okay, with two tails on it. Montreal is famous for its bagels, so if you go there in the future, make sure to go to some of their bagel shops. So you can see I'm struggling here a little bit because why? Because I made my strands too long. Okay, you see how big that hole is? Okay. It's not perfect. Okay, these are, okay, so here we got, I should probably get out my tape measure and measure this. It's basically, you don't want to get longer than 8 inches. That's what I remember. Okay. There we go, that one's good. Okay, once you shape this, then put the seam side down. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so our next step with these is going to be to let them proof. Okay, now what I love about bagels, it's so kind of cool, is that this is now a point, once you get them shaped, where you can, now you have some options, you know what I mean? So like we could just go ahead and let them proof and then we could boil them right away. We're gonna get our best results if we let them, so now we've got these, they're shaped, we let them proof, right? They need to almost double in size. Bagels are given what's called a short proof, okay? Like if you think of a Danish coffee cake, that's pretty puffy, but a bagel is pretty dense, right? So it would be considered a short proof. So we're not letting it expand to twice its size, which would be kind of a standard proof. It's more like it gets a 50% extra size to it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna, now I can proof these in the refrigerator. They do really great that way. I could leave them in the refrigerator overnight and then boil them tomorrow morning. That's another option. Anytime you do that, you're encouraging, like a blistering effect. Like sometimes we like on our sourdough breads, we like to see that blistering. Well, that happens if we refrigerate these overnight and the condensation from the refrigerator gathers on the skin of it. And then when it bakes, it blisters. So you can get more crusty bread by refrigerating it overnight. Okay. Okay, so I have some here that these proofed, and then what I did was I froze them. Okay, that's to me the easiest way to deal with bagels at all. Is you make them, you could proof them in the refrigerator or on the table, wherever you want, till they get to the size that you want them to be. Okay, and then you're going to freeze them or partially freeze them because.
Sorry, Heidi, I have a couple questions about the proofing. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna just leave them out to proof, is there a specific amount of time you would recommend for that?
Yeah, this dough is a pretty fast moving dough. Okay, so they'll be ready probably in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Which is fast.
And then another question too. So the blistering effect on the bagel, can you also get that by spraying it with water before you do the baking?
You don't get it. It's not as significant because what happens, it's just a really weird thing in the refrigerator. When you pull it out the next morning and you touch it, it's going to be damp. But the water permeates the skin actually. I've never had it happen quite the same way unless I refrigerated it overnight. But you'll get a lot of crust, but not quite the same. Those fish eyes, those blisters, which actually they're hard to get on a bagel even because we're going to boil the bagel now, and that is going to have another effect on the bagel. But for example, for sourdough breads, that's how they get that effect, is by returning it overnight. Okay, so we've got these, and now what we got to do is we got to think about how we're gonna boil these, right? So let's see. All right, so we've got. Let's see. Okay. So you always want to have in your poaching liquid water plus some kind of sweetener, okay? So it could, traditionally it's malt. Malt is the sprouted grain of barley. And those of us who like beer, I don't like beer. So those of you who like beer. But malt is from barley actually, okay? So, so it has a sweetness to it. But that would be traditional. But if you don't have that, you could use honey. Basically, you don't need very much. You just need like a teaspoonful for a gallon of water. The other crucial thing to put into your poaching liquid is baking soda, okay? Again, about a teaspoon. It doesn't need to be much. And then what you're gonna do is, sorry, combine it. Okay, and in a minute, I'm gonna lower the screen so you can see this, this pot that we're gonna poach these in, but right now I'm just gonna set up.
So Chef, one more question about the proofing.
Yeah.
If you're gonna proof it in the refrigerator, will the yeast be deactivated by the fridge or will it just be slowing it down?
It slows it down, right. Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. Yeast is gonna go most quickly at between 95 and 110 degrees. That's like its window when it's really expanding quickly. And then to slow it down, if you put it in the refrigerator at 40 degrees, it's called a retard. People call it a retarder, bakers do, because it's retarding the yeast. So it'll be fine. You could retard something for 18 hours pretty much, and it'll just go right back into activity once you warm it back up again.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any questions? Sorry, I start talking. I know I'm like a big blabbermouth. Okay, so our next thing that we have to, that we're going to think about is what makes a good everything bagel. Now, I don't know.
That's my favorite kind.
Me too. Like, you just can't go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Can you see this okay? Yeah, you can. Okay. So, all right. So these are some of the components that will make a good everything bagel. And actually, you know what? You guys probably all have your favorites. So, but what I found was, for me, fennel seed was the life-changing experience. Okay, so fennel is really good. Caraway. You want to have sesame and poppy. You could add in black sesame. That's really nice too. The thing that is the secret ingredient, the secret sauce, is either onion powder or garlic powder. Okay, Those two things give it a flavor that people are going to remember. So if you're somebody who's an economics major and you're costing all this out, it takes, I have to think for a minute, it takes about 5 grams of mixed seeds and stuff per bagel. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know, because what happens, I don't know if you're like me, you get to know how to do this, and then suddenly you're like, you know what, I think I'll make some bagels for my friends and for my neighbors. And you know, you start making this, and then you're mixing your everything seeds, right? And then, like, how much do you mix? And the problem is, this is an issue, because you're like, oh my God, only a baker would be thinking about this. But here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be poaching these bagels, and then we're going to egg wash them. Okay. Once I put that egg wash on there, and I dip it in the seeds are contaminated. Okay. So I want to try to really get close to the amount that I need, so I don't have any waste. Okay. All right. So salt is the other thing you want to put in here. People, we all know people love salt. So what am I missing here? Poppy seeds. Okay, so try really hard to find some kind of container that is about the size of the diameter of the bagel, okay? Because your life will just be a lot easier. Okay, so I've got my seeds and I've got my egg wash here. Okay. We're gonna set up for poaching in just a minute. Let me just whisk this. Okay. Okay, so this is a standard egg wash, which is about 50% egg to 50% liquid. Okay, you notice that I'm using water. That would be considered an egg wash for breads. If I want to make egg wash for scones, I might use egg yolk and cream. Okay, so I'm boosting the fat in it. That's going to make it shinier. This would be called a pour egg wash. Okay. Let's see. So here's my process is that I'm going to turn on my, I should have done this right away. It'll take 2 seconds. We're going to heat up our poaching liquid. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're running out of time. Okay, there we go. Can you see okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the way I like to set it up because this can be a mess. Like so many things in baking, right? It starts to get out of hand. You've got towels all over the place, or you know what I'm talking about. So you want to try to get some kind of plate that you can put the bagels onto once you take them out of the poaching liquid, okay? So always be thinking of a sequence, okay? So right now we've got our bagels that are ready to go into the liquid, and then they're gonna come out, and then we're gonna take them over to our station here of the seeds, and they're gonna go back onto the tray, okay? If I have a lot of bagels here, I would have 2 trays. So I'd have the tray of the ones going into the liquid, and I'd have a second one set up to put the finished bagels. Okay, it's just going to take a second. Now, this should just be, it shouldn't be boiling vigorously, okay? So the process of poaching the bagels is actually a pretty quick one. If you let it go too long, what will happen is the bagels really will not be edible. I don't know how to say it. They won't be good. Let's say that. So it's one of these weird things where I think we've all gone to the store and bought bagels that weren't poached. They weren't boiled. And that's a different bagel than a bagel that has been poached, right? They're 2 different animals. But but on the other hand, you can't overdo it because it will be undelicious.
Nobody wants an undelicious bagel. That's just a very, very sad situation.
Oh my God. Okay. So I don't know if you can see here, this is like, it's just like perfect. What I mean is that this is still really cold. So I'm picking it up and it's staying in shape. You know what I mean? Okay. That's what that freezing stuff is so important for.
So Chef, how does poaching help the process?
Yeah, so it toughens up the outside skin, and then it also leaves behind a residue of the malt, which bakes off to a crustiness and a chewiness. And the baking soda actually will dehydrate the crust. So same thing if you're into making pretzels. If you put baking soda, traditionally they would use lye. Okay, lye is another agent that will dehydrate the crust so that it gets crispy. Okay, so we're almost there. It's, I don't know if you can see, is it starting to boil, getting close. Okay, I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit. All right, and basically what I found to be the best way to do this is to put them in the face down, okay? Okay, I could have proofed them a little more. Like ideally, they should float. Okay, they're kind of heavy. It's okay. Okay, so now this part can get messy. So think about it ahead of time and have your tools ready to go. There we go. Now it's floating. Okay, they were sticking on the bottom. Oh, they're stuck on the bottom. Okay. Okay, so you see how we're taking it and then flip, okay? Flip it. If you're really good, like people who do donut frying, they do this with sticks, and you can actually, you don't need, they don't need two utensils. They just need one, and they flip it. But it needs to be kind of deep for you to do that. Okay, so you can see here how this is, the poaching will expand them a little bit. So you can kind of see how they're bloating a little bit. Once you see that happening, then get them out of there, okay? Because, again, if I boil them too long, they get very, very tough. It's just like a dumpling. If you think, I don't know, like people who are into dumplings, which not as many people I think are anymore, but like that's a bohemian type of tradition. Okay, let me turn this off. Okay, so you can see the bagels are ready to go. I'm gonna pivot this up again. Okay, how's that? Okay,
Great.
right. Okay, and then we're just gonna go over here. This next step you're gonna like, and then we're almost done. Okay, but I'm gonna egg wash it. Okay, can you see? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 So you don't need too much egg wash. Some bakers, I mean, really, if you go in a bagel shop, they don't egg wash it. Okay, so this is your special touch being home bakers. You know what I mean? You can make it a little bit nicer. Okay, but the next step is, the reason you wouldn't have to egg wash it is because they're wet coming out of the liquid. So you're just gonna tip it over into the seeds, just like that. Okay, shake it, tip it. Okay. There we go. Okay, and then these are ready to go in. We're gonna bake them at 500. Okay, you want to bake them at a hot temperature, at least at 450, because you want to encourage the browning. Okay, they've got to. If you think of a bagel, right, it's really dark on the outside, but the inside is like light, right? So they need to be in a hot oven. Okay, and oh, it's like, and miraculously they're done. Okay.
Whoa! Look at that. How long do you keep them in the oven for, Chef?
Yeah, about 20 minutes. Okay, and here's something that they're not tricky to bake, but they're a pain in the neck, sort of, as some bakers would say. Because what happens is, here's my tray, right? And I've got, actually what I like to do is bake them on the back of the tray, okay? Because if they're stuck inside of this ring, you get all these hot spots around the edge, okay? So if you put this sill pad or your parchment on the back of the sheet tray, and then put the bagels on the back, they have better exposure to the heat. But even with that, usually you're gonna have a dozen bagels on this tray. Like the recipe that you have from today makes 16 bagels. So you could put, you know, make 2 trays of 8. But even with that, they're pretty packed together, right? So at some point in the baking, after about 10 minutes, you're gonna wanna go into that oven, which is very hot. Make sure you've got some good quality hot pads. And you're gonna need to flip those bagels around, okay? You're gonna need to move some of the ones in the interior to the exterior of the tray, okay? Because otherwise they're not gonna bake evenly. So that's one other thing about them. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Does anyone have any questions at all? I know Heidi covered a lot of different items and answered a lot of your questions throughout. They're saying that they look fabulous. Thank you. So I think this was amazing. Yes, lots of thank yous.
Thank you so much. This was a treat. It really was.
Yeah.
It's great what you're doing. And actually, one thing I want to point out, these are actually bagels made with the starter. Remember we talked about, and here you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see these little blisters.
Yeah.
A little bit more blistered. One final thing before we all go away. Remember we fed our starter, that was the first thing we did. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's already starting to, this is already starting to cook, I always think of it as cooking. It's actually bubbling already. So it was, within an hour, it started to digest the flour that we gave it.
No, this was great. And yeah, people are saying, oh, they love your scale and the history facts, and it's like actually we did. I was mistaken. We didn't have a baking and pastry thing earlier. We had when Chef Jing did the piping technique. So my mistake that I had forgotten about that. But yes, you just watching you make the bagels and the process is so nice and kind of a relaxing thing to do. So I hope all of you really enjoyed it. Thank you everyone again for joining us today. Chef Heidi, would you like to say anything else to everyone?
No, I just appreciate so much, you know, that you took time out of your day, and I'm really grateful, and I hope we do more of this, really, because I think
Yeah.
you know, baking is a very therapeutic kind of activity. So thanks, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Again, this is going to be up on the YouTube channel. So we have some of our other items up on the YouTube channel. If you need that information or have any questions, want to request a topic, anything else, please taste@nl.edu. And also, heads up, if you have not noticed on your email yet, Thirsty Thursday is actually going to not be occurring this week. We're going to take a sober week instead. Or if you really want to, you've learned how to make a lot of cocktails. I think you can go and try and make one of John's cocktails on your own. And we will be back on Friday with a pairing of cheese and candy. So I hope to see folks then on Friday at noon, and have a great week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Chef.
Thank you. My pleasure.